So Nick, of course, we had 100 African writers of SFF, which won the BSFA award for non-fiction, best non-fiction. So how important do you see works like that in terms of bringing to prominence African writers and, well, writers of science fiction and fantasy?
Yeah, I think it's very important in terms of world science fiction, but I think it's also important for African writers to have their own forum to develop their own prominence within Africa as well. So, I think it's great that we're being given some visibility, and hopefully we can start winning some awards in the West as well. And I'm talking as somebody who kind of straddles, obviously, as being white, I straddle the West and Africa. To some extent, I'm in a privileged position as an African writer because I've access, as being white, I've got access to resources that a lot of black African writers don't have. But I think it's great that we're actually getting, we've got a foot in the door hold in terms of Western science fiction, and we're getting some notice and some prominence.
It's a fair point that, as a white South African, you've been able to access, historically at least, places where a lot of black South African actors... Sorry.
That's all right.
It's a fair... It's a fair point that as a white South African, you've had access to certain things that black South African writers haven't, and black South Africans in general. But you did do quite a lot of work in the community, in townships, in your time over there, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I kind of trained as a clinical psychologist during Apartheid, and in fact, when I was training, the state of emergency was declared. And I'd worked in townships before then as a community worker, so that was in the early 80s. So I just sort of made a decision just to work in black areas because as a white person just felt wrong focusing just on living a white existence in a white area when I knew there was so much wrong happening in black areas. So I just thought I needed to know what was happening there, and I needed to get out there and work there and learn.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, townships in South Africa, that kind of oppression actually helped to forge strong communities in a strange way.
Yeah.
Did you find that as well?
Yes, I did. I think people rallied together because they had a common enemy for one, but also they needed to survive, and they needed to kind of help each other out. So I think there was a tremendous sense of community spirit, and I think that was important. Yeah. Mm.
Your novel, Azanian Bridges, well, basically, the plot line is set in an alternate world where apartheid is still the norm, and then takes it from there and spins it into a science fiction thriller, if you like. So obviously, your time there, how much of an impact did that have on what you wanted to write and what you wanted to cover within that book?
A huge amount, actually. I mean, when I wrote it, I pulled back a lot of memories from the past. And when I first submitted it as a book to Muzi in South Africa, the reader said to me, "Why didn't you just write it as a 1980s struggle novel?" But that wasn't the point of the book. The point of the book was thinking about how the legacy of apartheid continues, how racism continues, and how the country's taken choices and decisions and paths which haven't been the best subsequently, it seems, since independence. So it's thinking about the route South Africa's gone along, and thinking about the legacy we carry still, and just challenging the decisions that have been made in the country by everybody at some point, eventually. Yeah.
Do you think that fiction writing and tackling subjects like that, especially ones with political relevance and social relevance, that fiction has a power maybe that non-fiction doesn't in some ways?
I think it does. I think, the whole thing about the pen is mightier than the sword, that people buy into stories, and that sometimes, there's a whole doubt about news and fake news and, what is real and what isn't real and non-fiction. So people are skeptical when it comes to non-fiction, but people get immersed, they get hooked in a story. So I think stories still carry real power and do carry power for change.
You actually started off much earlier on in your career. You wrote a young adult novel called The Stone Chameleon. How did you find tackling subject matters in there as opposed to writing, if you like, an adult work?
Yeah. I found it challenging at one level, but I've got kids and they were kind of teenagers at the time, so I sort of had a kind of a route into the adolescent world, the teen world. And so for me, what I wanted to do with that as well is thinking about the aging of the science fiction population, thinking actually we need to keep science fiction alive and vibrant. So we need the youngsters on board, we need the youngsters to read it. And then also some of it's set in townships, so we need black people on board as well. At the time when I tried to sell it, I was told black people don't read science fiction. So I said, well, what's your evidence for that?
Yeah.
And they couldn't come up with anything. I said, well, look, why don't you show it around? And they had some township readers that they finally found who said that they liked the book, so they went ahead with it. So for me, it's about encouraging youngsters, and it's about diversifying the audience of science fiction.
Yeah, because that is very important. Bringing in youth, especially the youth of countries like South Africa, because they're the ones that are going to forge the direction the country takes.
Yeah, that's right. I've got a book, another young adult book, just now shortlisted in the Sanlam Youth Literature Award. In 2017, so there's 5 books that have been shortlisted in the English section because they've got African languages and Afrikaans. So it's Polani on the Moon.
Right.
So it's a kind of science fiction story set in kind of 30 years into the future, moon base, and South Africans on the moon. So
well, I don't know. I suppose that would make a good title for a spin-off movie, South Africans on the Moon.
Yeah, like Nigerians in space, Africans getting out there.
Well, that would be a good one as well, because it's even within a science fiction, from a science fiction perspective, a lot of the historical science fiction, which sees humans expanding out into the stars, you don't really see black people in general playing a big role in that. So.
Yeah. It's about getting everybody out there, and just kind of getting out the reality that the world is a rainbow of people, and it's not just white.
So in terms of what's happening, I mean, there seems to be a good momentum behind recognition for African writers in general. There seems to be a lot more prominence, which is great. Do you think there's still a lot more that could be done in the industry in general?
Yes, I think certainly publishing. I think there's a shortage of publishers in Africa, and I think with the internet and kind of democratization of publishing, that we're getting more and more coming in. But certainly I think African fiction, to be developed and sustained, needs to be sustained within Africa with African themes. I know the Kane Prize is good, but people have argued it tends to focus stories towards Western perceptions of Africa. So the stories tend to be what kind of fulfill Western stereotypes of what African experience should be like. But I think more and more people are subverting those expectations. I think having a strong publishing platform within Africa would help African experiences to be authentically portrayed, whatever authenticity is. I think it'll just make for a diversity of experiences to be out there. But I think the infrastructure needs to be built still, or reinforced, really.
Yeah, I mean the economic reality, I guess, is more pronounced in Africa, just because of there's so many countries that go through so much turmoil in that way.
I'm kind of thinking about reading on phones and getting stories out on phones, for example. Thinking about the internet and access, and everybody's got a phone. Most people got a phone, so a lot of people read stories or read news on phones. So it's about finding a kind of appropriate medium to get those stories out.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been fascinating talking to you, and good luck for your future projects and for your interesting insight into everything.
Thanks very much, Rob, for having me.